Welcome to Life After 40 Conversations with Philip Blackett. This is a space for honest, thoughtful conversations about midlife, without the hype, without diagnosis, and without pressure. If you're somewhere between 35 and 55 years old and quietly navigating questions about your energy, your identity, your work, your faith, your relationships, or your health, you're not alone. Midlife can often look stable on the outside and feel unsettled underneath. Life After 40 Conversations exists to do one thing well: to give adults in midlife the language, clarity, and calm perspective for a season that can often feel confusing, lonely, or silently overwhelming. This show exists to help you feel seen, steady, and less alone as you navigate the second half of life. Now, keep in mind, this is not a self-help program. It's not a medical show, and it's not a motivational pep rally. What this is a meaning-making space. Each episode is a grounded conversation between myself and with leaders, caregivers, entrepreneurs, pastors, parents, professionals, and thoughtful human beings who are living through midlife in real time just like you and me. We reflect on lived experiences without issuing prescriptions with peer pressure, because I believe in this deeply. Midlife is worth living and worth living well. And living it well doesn't start with pressure, it starts with perspective. So if you ever thought to yourself, why does this season feel so different for me? Or why am I rethinking things that used to feel settled before? You're exactly where you're supposed to be. And I'm grateful that you're here. So let's begin today's conversation. Now, this conversation I've been looking forward to for a little bit, partly because of how I'm going to introduce my guest here today. My guest is Len May. And right before the show, I asked him how I would like to introduce him. And he shared with me how his AI had thought about him. And so I thought to myself, that's a novel way to introduce somebody. So I'm going to share with you or read to you what AI has to say about our guest, Len May. Quote, based on what I know, Len's life seems dynamic and multifaceted, blending creativity, business, and a passion for personal growth. Here's what it might look like. Len's deeply involved in producing and hosting his own podcast, Everything is Personal, which showcase diverse guests ranging from artists and musicians to medical experts and entrepreneurs. This likely involves researching, interviewing, editing, and promoting each episode. He also seems to enjoy building meaningful connections with people who have unique perspectives. Len also has an entrepreneur drive. As someone focused on DNA-based health and coaching, Len's probably working on expanding lenmaycoaching.com, positioning himself as a thought leader in personalized health and wellness, and he seems to balance the science of genomics with the art of personal connection. Cultural curiosity. Len's interest in iconic albums and music history, along with his engaging record of the day posts, reflect a love for music and storytelling. He likely spends time discovering and sharing meaningful cultural moments. Time with visionaries. Len's guests suggest that he's constantly surrounded by innovative thinkers, from cannabis science experts to creatives like Prince's keyboardists. These interactions likely inspire and energize him. Balancing creativity and precision. Whether it's crafting catchy podcast descriptions or sharing DNA insights, Len balances creativity with a detail-oriented approach. And finally, health and personal growth. Len's passion for DNA testing and personalized health suggests he's deeply invested in self-improvement and helping others optimize their lives. In short, Len's life seems full of intellectual curiosity, meaningful connections, and a dedication to both creativity and personal development. Len, welcome to Life After 40 Conversations.
Thank you, Philip. I appreciate it. It's so funny because, my main business, I'm a CEO and co-founder of a company called EndoDNA, and we are a decision support platform for doctors, basically, for healthcare practitioners. And we do use DNA and epigenetics and all that stuff. But the AI didn't focus on that. It focused on all the other stuff, which I find interesting because it really goes with what I feel I'm passionate about. It's not that I'm not passionate about my business. My business is not my life and it doesn't define me. And I think your AI, once you engage with it a lot more, it starts understanding what really you're truly passionate about. And that's what I think it's getting to.
I like it. And as somebody that has a budding friendship with ChatGPT himself, I can
Right?
definitely appreciate and resonate where you're coming from, sir.
There you go.
And so I think it's a great lead into my first question, which basically is beyond the introduction that AI gave of you,
Hmm.
before the titles and the resume. Who is Lynn in this season of life?
I think I'm a student. I consider myself somebody who is extremely curious and is passionate about learning. And I don't mean learning in class. So, like, when I was a kid, I was diagnosed with ADHD or ADD. Wasn't really hyperactive. And if you really think about ADD, they tell you you have a disorder. Your
Hmm.
brain thinks differently. Different doesn't mean there was something wrong with you. It just
Right.
means that you're neurodivergent in a certain way. And we all have a different way that we process information. And I believe leaning into this curiosity became my superpower. So
Hmm.
for me, the ability to intake information and using, AI or anything else right now just accelerates that. So that sort of it drives me to the next thing. So I'm really passionate about learning different things, knowing. When I was a kid, my parents, I was always the why guy. Well, why? 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 So I still am that. And now, having it in the palm of my hand makes it much easier for me to get those answers.
As somebody that is on the autism spectrum himself,
Mhm.
from one neurodivergent brother to another, I appreciate that answer.
There you
I
go.
think that um, one, you already said before, like you are beyond your work, you're beyond what you produce, and being able to see what makes you different is a key way of illustrating who you are, as far as like your superpowers you mentioned before.
Right.
And really, in a sense, as we get older, it's those unique strengths of ours, those differences that we tend to really appreciate, even though sometimes we might underappreciate them early on, right?
Yeah. And, I, I got into the DNA business and by really thinking that we're all different. Our DNA is different, but it really isn't. 99.9% of us are the same. It's a
Mm,
0.1% that makes us different. So if you
mhm.
think about it, we're always looking to divide and we're very divisive, especially nowadays with all these different whatever it is that you believe in. But if you really get to the essence of it, we're almost all the same. The things that make us different is not just that 0.1%, but the way we live our lives. And the genetic predispositions do not determine the epigenetic expression. So what I'm gonna try to explain it this way. We get our DNA from our half from our mother, half from our father. So if you think about it, and if you can visualize a really big circuit breaker with a bunch of on-off switches. So when we're born, some of those on-off switches are turned on. So
Mhm.
like things like, our hair color, skin color, eye color, things of that nature. But the remainder of those genetic predispositions, maybe like 20% are turned on, let's say 20, 30, depending on the individual. The remainder of those other switches are based on our lifestyle choices. And what I mean by that are, um, what we feed our bodies. So food and nutrients, exceptionally important in your epigenetic expression, turning those switches on or turning off something that may be turned off. So how we feed ourselves, food, nutrients, minerals, all those things. The second thing that's really important is protecting ourselves from the exposure to heavy metals, pesticides, all these other things that we can ingest, and that can turn on things that we don't want to turn on. And the third, and we tend to sort of overlook that, is our own neurochemistry. And what I mean by that is hormones, stress hormones, neurochemicals, cortisol. When we have a body that's supposed to be a vessel and supposed to maintain homeostasis or balance. And when things are out of balance, endogenous, that means we produce it ourselves, then everything else is a domino effect. And it turns things on that we don't want to turn on and vice versa. So understanding how our own neurochemistry works and what we excrete and making sure that we maintain that homeostasis and balance, that keeps us living a long, healthy life beyond, like I'll be 54 in a month. So beyond midlife, my idea is life after 40. Well, what about life after 100? Maybe we can get to that point and have a real healthy health span, not just live our lives for a very long time.
I like that. Not just the quantity of life, but the quality of life as you
Exactly.
go forward, right?
Exactly.
And so I really like that analogy about the circuit breakers first. So which ones are on and off, and which ones might trigger one to go one side to the other. Um, so in particular, when you think about, midlife in particular, Len, like when did you first realize something had shifted within you that might have turned something from on to off or off to on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I turned 40, I separated from my wife at the time. I had a young daughter, and I was started the divorce process and understanding, and I never experienced this really. I got depressed. And when I did my own genetic, profile, I saw that I had some depression markers, and I became, was I diagnosed? Yeah, I think I was diagnosed as having some depression. I don't really take medication, so I didn't, consume prescription medication, but I made a conscious decision in my life that I'm going to make some changes. And the first was how I treat myself. So making sure that I speak to myself kindly, I treat myself with love, I, pause to experience things instead of like running through life the whole time, pursuing a goal. Because every single time that I reach a certain goal, at the end of the day, I was like, okay, that feels great. What's next? So I never gave myself a chance to really have it resonate and sit with me for a while. The second thing is health journey. So I made sure, I'm healthier, or I feel better and probably healthier in my 50s than I was in my 30s. And that's the reason I made that a priority. So I kind of overdid it a little bit because it made me feel good, but I sort of dialed it down. I was crazy about what I put in my body and exercising twice a day, yoga, but too much. So I found that middle ground. So exercise, I moved from Philadelphia to Los Angeles. I live in LA now, and that was in 2010. And in 2011, I separated. So after a year, so new place, no real decision what I'm going to do in my life work-wise, because I was a commercial real estate broker, and it's not a reciprocal estate. So I wasn't sure I wanted to do that. Real estate was interesting at that time. So there was a lot of changes, and how I responded to those changes, I think, built a level of resilience that I already had in my life through, being homeless and a lot of different other things, that allowed me to say, you know what, I can count on me and I can get past this. So focusing on me helped me to have different relationships with the people around me and really find my tribe. And that tribe that I didn't know existed, they were, my friends, family, etc. But when things were tough, that's the people who came out to support me. So all those things I think helped me kind of pivot and transition and allowed me to try different things in order for me to focus on what is the next version of my life, the next, halfway point, whatever. What's the other half going to look like for me?
Absolutely. Wow, that's great. Especially finding people that can navigate those changes with you.
Right.
Really helpful there. Was there anything that you notice about midlife where something that used to work for you when you were younger just suddenly didn't anymore?
I think it's more or less what what I was willing to give up in
Okay.
order to grow. And what I mean by that is, so I came from a pretty abusive household. I didn't speak to my parents for years. They kicked me out when I was a kid, and being able to give up the feeling that I had of anger and blame and all these other things because it was just hurting me. And being able to give that up helped me create a brand new relationship with my parents, especially my dad at the
Hmm.
time, who I speak daily, every single day now. It changed everything because me having this conversation and him saying, listen, I'm sorry. I didn't know any better. There's nothing I can do to change what happened,
Right.
but let's rebuild going forward. And that's the thing that I think having to rebuild these relationships by me giving up my feelings of the past and having to be present in the moment so I can build a better future. I think that was extremely a big change in my life because as you start, getting your midlife, you start realizing, okay, mortality is something you have to have a conversation with, and, in your 20s, I did some crazy shit. So I don't know if I can curse or not. A crazy stuff. I have a lot of stories, but as I got in my 40s and then obviously my 50s, you have to start looking at what can you do to be an example for your family? What can you
Mhm.
do to be an example for the people around you and be the best human that you can be and treat people with love and respect first instead of having these demands of your life. Hey, you gotta respect me. Well, am I giving the respect back to you?
Right.
So there's a lot of those kind of fundamental changes that I had to make in my life that I realized that were important to me. How I treat myself, how I treat others, and then, making sure that I cut out the people out of my life that are not vibrating at my frequency.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Was there anything that surprised you the most about midlife?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I thought, no, you're turning 40, you're old, and I was like, man, what? Maybe I can't run as fast, but I'll compete most 20-some-year-olds that are there. It's the mentality that you have that experience from the past. I think that was something I leaned into. And then, your body's still capable of doing a lot of things that I thought when I was going to be 40, because I saw, my parents' friends and I saw people in 40s and 50s, and they seemed really old. And once I'm there now, I'll tell you, my daughter goes to Berkeley, and she invited me to uh, parents' weekend or something like that. She's like, Dad, you want to go to the frats with me? I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to the frats. And I was like, all right, I'm hanging out with the football team. I'm hanging out with 20-some-year-olds, and we're still, and partying and having fun. And she wasn't embarrassed of having me around because I'm still, I'm still a cool dad. So you can be that person, just a mature version of yourself in your 40s, 50s, and so on.
That's awesome. I haven't reached that age yet. Because my daughters are gonna be 9 years old this month. So we haven't got to college. Will dad accompany me to the frat scene or the party scene yet? Hopefully I could be as cool as you on that one. But I do appreciate that notion. It's just like, hey, like you can essentially redefine what age or old looks like to you.
Right.
And so I definitely think that's a win if you can be on the party scene on college and your daughter's like, "Please go home, dad. It's past your bedtime, dad. Please, please leave."
It wasn't like that. She was like, "Hey, let's go to the club afterwards and drink some shots with my friends." So it was like that.
That is a different type of dad. That is not the typical dad I usually see there. So that's enlightening to see that those type of dads exist.
There you go.
So when you look at midlife for you, was there anything that being in that season forced you to stop ignoring? And if so, what changed once you paid more attention to it?
I think the things I stopped ignoring, as I mentioned, are the relationships and my own personal health and wellness. Not that I ignored my health, but I think I may have ignored some of my mental health more or less. So I had a coach, I got a therapist, and I worked through a lot of the issues that I went through that I suppressed because I really didn't feel comfortable speaking to people about the things that I went through in my life in detail. Like story wise, I can tell a story, but how it actually affected me internally, I really didn't talk to people about that. So getting past that and having somebody to work with mental health, I think that was extremely important. The second thing is gave myself some goals uh, and really started focusing on goals with my health, goals with my work, what I wanted to accomplish in my life, and goals with my relationships. And then I started realizing that it all starts with me. My
Mhm.
relationship with me and what I want from others, I have to work on me. So it's sort of like doing this internal gap analysis, looking to see, well, what do I want in people? What kind of friends do I want in my life? What kind of relationship do I want in my life? What kind of relationship do I want with my daughter? Those kind of things. And then when you ask yourself those questions, then you have to ask yourself, what kind of person am I? Am I doing that? What kind of
Yep.
friend am I? What
Yep.
kind of boyfriend am I? What kind of father am I? So you have these expectations that you want to receive from others, but you have to be able to look internally and have those expectations of yourself. So that's self work, and it's an ongoing process, daily self work, and always looking for what else can I do. So from meditation, and what type of meditation? Not all meditation is created equally. Like I went to a Joe Dispenza retreat. Some of it was extremely difficult for me with having ADHD and being able to concentrate on that. Uh, Maybe looking at transcendental meditation help. What type of, like, when are you in flow state? So
Mhm.
understanding where your neurochemistry is at its optimal. And for me, like being able to recognize the fact that I'm lucky because I live in Los Angeles, I can go on a hike in shorts in January. I was just in Philly, stuck in a snowstorm. I was like, that's why I got the hell out of that place because I like Philly. It's great. I love the sports teams and all that stuff, but the weather makes a humongous difference. When you wake up, people are like, LA is so expensive and taxes and all that stuff. Yeah, I pay the sunshine tax for a reason because the sunshine tax makes me feel better. So going out on a hike in January wearing shorts, that's a big thing. And being able to recognize that that is part of my flow state. When I have any challenges that I'm going through, I'm able to sort of ask myself those questions and let it go and go on a hike. And what happens as hokey and woo-woo as it sounds, you sort of tune into the energy of receiving information. If you're thinking about it, you're pushing. And if you sort of let it rest and you
Mhm.
sort of tune into the frequency, I heard a lot of musicians talk about that. You sort of have this external antenna that's vibrational energy that attracts things back to you. And that's how music flows through you. And that's, I
Mhm.
think, how answers to those questions flow through you as well. And, and then being able to pause, which is the most difficult thing for me to do. I always felt I'm not enough. And it's part of my upbringing. It's part of, being very, very hard on myself. And I'm like, well, if I'm that hard on myself, imagine how hard I can be on my daughter. And
Mhm.
how did it make me feel when I was
Mhm.
being parented that way? So making those kind of changes in my life really affected, the people around me and then came back to me. So it's sort of like you put out, you get back, you take it and you put it back out. So it creates this circle.
That's awesome. I think one of the things that I really kind of gravitated towards in particular, Len, was really kind of understanding what you were sharing before, that oftentimes as we get older, when we encounter new experiences like parenting, it often has us in a reflective mode as far as like, okay, as we have one young human being to raise now, we find ourselves often thinking about, well, how were we parented when we were in that stage as well? And then often having that question as far as, okay, are there some things I repeat from what I experienced and what I observed? Or do I make a different choice in terms of doing some things differently? And I think that one of the things I really respect about you, Len, is that it's really apparent that you had a number of occasions where you really asked yourself these questions. What do I want my life to be like? How do I want to be as far as the type of man, father, boyfriend, business owner, entrepreneur, whatever role that would be. And I guess what goes on in my head is just being that introspective, being that, really thoughtful and being able to think about what you want your life to be like. If you hadn't gone that route and asked those type of questions and been so thoughtful and reflective of where you wanted to go, what do you think it would have cost you if you kept going the way you were before you started doing that stuff?
It it would have brought me back to the person I was when I was married and went through a divorce. I even looking back at myself at that time, not as a parent, I think I was doing a really good job as a parent because I was, as you said, Philip, uh, I was trying to do the opposite of what my dad did. And I had this conversation with him. He was not happy to hear that. He said, "You're such a great dad. I just do the opposite of what you did." So he didn't like that at all. But it's being able to look. I didn't do it by myself. I had mentors, and your mentor doesn't have to be somebody that you know. Like I went to a Tony Robbins event, and I used to read books by Jim Rohn. I was always that kid who I was on the beach reading. A book by Jim Rohn or anybody that's personal development. I was always seeking something spirituality, personal development, anything. So I always was that person, but I think I leaned into it a lot more at that stage of my life because I was at a crossroads. And to be completely transparent, I felt like I was in a daze. So for 1 year, I was in this depressive state and I made a lot of really bad decisions or didn't make a decision. So
Mm,
just sat there and let things happen to me.
right.
And when you let life happen to you, you're not in control over your life. You have to be proactive in making changes and taking action. You can't just sit through. And it's easy because we're creatures of comfort. It's very easy for us to say, I'll do it tomorrow, kind of thing. And it's not easy to push yourself to get through that. But I learned a couple different things from, like people like Tony Robbins and Joe Dispenza and et cetera, et cetera. It's being able to recognize your own reward system.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example of that. So I don't really like going to the gym. Some people love going to the gym, and I go like 3-4 times a week and work out. I don't enjoy it. I don't like the process of going. Working out is okay, but I love the sauna, for instance. So I say, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go through the thing that I don't love to reward myself with the sauna. And that actually works really well with ADHD because you get that dopamine hit. So you're looking for that hit of dopamine, and that's my dopamine hit. So if you sort of work on your life and really start learning more about yourself and being introspective, understanding the things that make you move, that's the thing to be able to lean into a lot more. So those are the things I think really transformed me. And if I stayed the course, and look, if people are happy in everything they do, just keep doing what you're doing. If you're not, then you're the one that has to make the change. And as uncomfortable as it is, and stop getting ready to get ready. Just get yourself up and go.
It makes me think of something I think Jim Rohn might have actually said, where it's like, if you don't like something, you can just change it because you're not a tree.
Yeah.
You're not stuck there. Man, I such a big fan of Jim Rohn. I appreciate you sharing that. Him
Yeah.
and Tony Robbins. And so when you think about where things are now for you, are there any beliefs, any habits or rhythms that you take on regularly that have now become non-negotiables for you?
Yeah. So I changed the way I eat. That's non-negotiable. So I haven't eaten meat in 16 years.
Oh, wow.
I don't eat sugar. And I did eat sugar the other night because there was a celebration and my girlfriend brought over this amazing dessert. So I tried a few pieces. So yes, once in a while it's okay, but I typically do not eat sugar. I made sure that I tried to do as much as possible, write things down. And I've
Okay.
always kept journals, but write things down. I don't mean like just a gratitude journal. I mean, just write things down that you want to have in your life and take an accounting of those things. And the one thing is a big switch for me. The one thing that I used to do is look at the things I didn't complete. So, oh man, I didn't finish this. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And the shift is celebrate the things you did complete and you did do instead of focusing on ones that you didn't. And then made it a really major point in my life, not just my own personal health and wellness and what I do for work. I connected that to a contribution. I want to make people feel better. I want to help people be treated as individuals, personalized health and wellness. And doctors need to be able to treat patients as individuals and practice healthcare and not sick care. So I feel like I'm making a contribution to the world with my business as well. And the last part of that is your relationships. Having great people around you and not being afraid to say, you know what, I have love for you, but we're not vibing right now. It's
Mhm.
not the people I want in my life. You're allowed to let people go and have a great circle of people around you. So romantic relationships, and it's a work in progress, in progress all the time. Relationship with your family, your kids, your parents if you still have them, anybody else, siblings. All those things are really important because I'm a huge believer in energy. And the way you vibrate and the way your frequency is, if you vibrate at a high frequency, you attract those things back to you. And I'm not just talking about The Secret, all those books where you just sit and you're going to think about, I'm going to manifest. No, you're going to think about that stuff, then you're going to go out and do that. So
Mhm.
I'm a big believer in those kind of things. And if you need help with anything, get coaching, You need somebody to help you, be physically fit, get a coach. But look at that coach. Make sure they're physically fit. Make sure they're doing the right thing. I had a doctor. I was talking to this doctor one time, and he's giving me all this health advice. Extremely overweight, and then he goes out. Do you mind if we walk outside and smoking cigarettes? And I'm like, yeah, bro. You know what I'm saying? Thank you for your advice, but we're good. So just be aware. There's a lot of people out there that do the talk, but do not walk the walk. So just be a good contributor to your community.
He's like, something's not meshing well with you, sir. He's like,
Right.
you want me to cut down the sugar and I'm watching you eat a honey bun in front of me. And
Exactly.
I don't know how I feel about this. And I feel awkward pointing it out to you. I'm just going to see myself out stage left. Thanks so much.
Exactly.
Appreciate it. Wow. So back to where things are now for you. You clearly made quite a journey from the start. What does thriving look like for you now?
I'm obsessed with reaching my goals as long as those goals are aligned with contribution.
Okay.
So, what I mean by that is, achieving things in my life. I was financially pretty successful at different ventures, but like my company now, EndoDNA, I had people that invested in us. I had people who believed in us. I have people who, put in money, time. So my goal is to make sure that I work for them. I reward the people that believed in me. And at the same time, make a contribution to the world to make that a better place, the best that I can possibly do. And I'm obsessed with that. So there is a balance, or sometimes it's an imbalance. There's a burner theory. There's 4 burners, and you can't really have all 4 burners be lit at the same time. So
Okay.
sometimes you got to pick your 2 burners, and maybe my 2 burners are my health and my business, and maybe my love life is not that priority. This week or this day, and maybe something else is not the priority. So you can't keep all 4 lit at the same time. So I have to be very conscious and aware of that, because sometimes my desire for success and contribution overtakes some of the other things. So being able to give to myself. So having that ability to be introspective and focus on the things that you are aware of, and then listening to the people around you that are telling you, hey, stop, celebrate. I'm over here. You're sort of ignoring me. We haven't had, a weekend getaway in a while, or I haven't. No, I try to talk to my daughter every day, but talking and really hearing are 2 different things.
Right.
Just giving a report. Well, this is what I did. Well, this is what I did. That's not a connection. So putting value on experiences and true connections, that's something that I really am focusing on in life, with my business partner, with the people who work with me, and trying to think about, people say, well, how do you want to be remembered, and all those things,
Hmm.
different things. I'm like, I don't really, think about how I want to be remembered per se, because I'm not here, so
Right.
whatever. You remember me, you remember me. But what I do want to focus on is that I leave a contribution. So I make whatever my world better than when, before I was here.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think about the 2 things that just came off really clear for you was connection and contribution.
Yep. Exactly.
Absolutely. Len, like this is great. Man, I've learned so much from this conversation already, and I'm sure a lot of the people that are listening and watching this have felt the same way. I'm curious, as we start to conclude our conversation together here, if there is someone out there that is watching or listening to us right now. And that person may be in a place where he or she is going through a tough spot in midlife, maybe silently struggling somewhere or finding themselves drifting off somewhere off course or even burning out at this stage or in the season of life. With that being said, what would you want to share with that person right now?
You're resilient AF. And I just want to make sure I emphasize that everybody. I had a conversation with, look, along the way, being in my almost mid 50s now, I lost a lot of friends along the way. I lost a lot of friends to overdoses, to making dumb decisions, and some of them to, disease, but mostly preventable things like, overdose and stuff. And if you feel, there's this level of pride, maybe, our generation kind of has as well, that we don't really ask for help when we need it. And I really, really strongly urge people, there are communities and there is help for anyone. And if you think there is no light, well, the darkest moment is right before the lightest moment happens in life. So if you're going down this tunnel and it's dark, you got to keep going through it because the light is on the other side of that. And I really want people to understand, look, there's a lot of different roads that I could have taken. There's forks and roads. And I have friends of mine who took the other road. And being homeless, not knowing what I'm going to do, and being able to reinvent myself over the years, I think that's an example that I can leave behind for, my family. And I want to leave behind for your audience, because we only have one life. We're given this vessel. First of all, take care of the vessel. Second of all, and I'm not saying anything against people that work in a cubicle. So I'm going to preface this that if my parents worked 9 to 5 their whole lives, they liked what they did, they retired, and they're fine. That was not for me. And if you're the person that's sitting in that cubicle 9 to 5 and you're miserable in your life and your Groundhog Day every single day is rinse and repeat over and over, you have the power to do something else. And by the way, you don't have to quit and change your life all the time. They asked Arnold Schwarzenegger, one time, it's like, well, you have to get this many hours in a day. And what do you do with sleep? And I got to sleep. He goes, sleep faster. So I found that fascinating. It's like we all have the same hours in the day, but it's
Right.
what you do with those hours. So you can go to your 9 to 5, maybe you have an idea. Maybe after dinner, you sit down and spend 2 hours on your idea. And sometimes even having hobbies. Like I always wanted to be, one of the regrets that I had in my life, which I don't anymore, is like my parents got a psychiatrist to talk me out of going something to do with music to go to physical therapy school. And this is before I was like 16 or something like that. And I wish I would have went into music, because one of my mentors in music was Rick Rubin. And he's like, he doesn't play any instruments. He's just a tastemaker. He's got an ear. And I always thought I had that. So I try to scratch that itch with, my record of the day, as you were saying, or going to concerts and getting that. So it doesn't necessarily have to always be a vocation or a career. It can be something that you're interested in doing on the side, but take advantage of all those interests. Be clear what you like. I was together with my friends from Philly a little while ago, and I'm like, what do you guys do? Like, we don't go downtown. When was the last concert you've been to? I haven't been in a concert in like 6 years. I'm like, but you love it though. Yeah, but life and all that stuff. So getting out of your comfort zone, I think, is really important.
Absolutely. No, that's really helpful, especially the whole sense of, you know, not if you find yourself in a rut, like see where you're at, and know you can make a decision and choose to come out of it, try something new. Doesn't have to be, like you said, doesn't have to overhaul your entire life. Just start with something small and see where that goes and kind of follow that journey on what that could lead, you know?
I wanted to add one more thing because I was thinking back to a lot of my friends who I lost, and one of the things that happened to them, and people who are uh, have some things in their lives that they have to deal with. Sometimes it's easier to numb, and that's what they actually did. They numbed with drugs and all kinds of different things. When they got clean for a moment, what happened was the flood of all the stuff they left behind that they were trying to numb came back,
Hmm.
and the capacity to deal with that doesn't go away. You can shove down and stuff all that stuff. You can mask it with all these different things, but if you don't work through it, it's going to come out one way or another. As difficult as it is to work through that, that's one of the things that life is about. It's being able to get better and work on your muscles and work on your physical muscles, work on your mental muscles, work on those things, as difficult as it may be. Because if you continue to numb with things, one day it's going to come out of somewhere. So
Right.
just be aware that, and that's what happened to them. I would say that 90% of them that try to get clean actually did get clean, then realized they have to deal with all the stuff they numbed before,
Mm,
went back to the same dose, and then, that was too much. There was an overdose.
right. Wow. No, that makes sense. This has been really helpful, Len. Yeah, I love your perspective on it and just on life in general and how you've gone from challenging times to times where you just kind of made peace with things and made different decisions and, came across the right resources and the right mentors to learn a better way and then just see how you pass it on to other people, the next generation, your family, and even to us here on the show. And so, first of all, thank you for that. And I'd love to ask you as we conclude here, um, if there is anyone here that really resonates with what you're talking about and your way of looking at life, your work, your records, what's the best place where they can follow you from here and stay connected with you after this?
Yeah, I mean, my business website is EndoDNA, ENDODNA.com. I also do coaching for people with ADHD. That's Len May, LenMay coaching.com. But I'm available on social, all the platforms under Len May. I think on Instagram I'm Len May DNA. So, but I also have Len May Music, where I share my record of the day. I have a book. It's called Making Cannabis Personal. You can get that on Amazon or wherever you get books. I have a brand new book that's coming out soon with the connection of ADHD and polymathy. And yeah, I'm accessible. If people want to email me direct, it's Len, at endodna.com. I'm happy to help people as much as I possibly can and mentor and connect them to the right resources.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. We'll make sure we include that here as well. And so, listen, this has been great, Len. You've shared a lot here that's been really helpful for not only people listening and watching, but also me taking mental notes, just asking these questions and just learning from you. So I really appreciate that. And, for everyone listening in on this, let this be a reminder to you. Midlife may come with its challenges and it also comes with its opportunities, depending on how you look at it. It's a great season to understand what's happening. And hopefully you take something from this conversation, from what Lynn has shared with us. If there's something here that Lynn talked about that really resonates with you, see where that goes. You don't have to rush into action on that. Just feel free to sit with it, meditate on it, like you said before. Find the right meditation for you. But at the same time, work with it. and just see what it clarifies for you. What does it invite you to pay more attention to at this stage or in the season of life, we'll say, that you're in? And, because that's where real change begins, not with urgency, but with awareness. So, with that being said, Len, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation with me. I really, truly enjoyed it. For everyone that wants to learn more about Life After 40 after this, feel free to go to our website at lifeafter40.com. You're also welcome to connect with me at philipblackett.com. And just as a friendly reminder as we conclude, just as something for us to remember, midlife is worth living and worth living well. So thanks so much, Len, for being a part of this, for everyone spending time listening and watching this podcast episode, this conversation. Really appreciate it. This is Life After 40 Conversation with Philip Blackett. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. Feel free to share it with somebody you think this could be helpful for. Thank you, Len, also. Really appreciate you being part of this. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you in the next conversation.